They said Earth was finished, that humanity had chosen peace because it had forgotten how to fight. Then an alien scout fired a single shot, and the stars trembled as something old woke beneath the clouds of Earth. It started with a routine patrol. The alien ship Vothar's Promise, belonging to the DanceThe coalition, drifted through a sector long abandoned, Sector Sol 1. The region was quarantined generations ago, labeled Cultural Containment Zone, Primitive Origin Species. But curiosity is a predator's weakness. The Vothar captain wanted a trophy. A relic. A fragment of old Earth tech to mount in his command hall. So, when their scanners found a derelict orbital ring, they approached, not knowing it wasn't derelict at all. Inside that ring, something ancient slept. A relay buried in silence, its signal dormant for over a century. Until their ship locked on with a targeting beam. Then the relay woke up. One pulse. One faint transmission. The message was short, burned into every frequency within 100 light-years. Terran network breach detected. Defensive protocol. Orion initiated. The crew laughed at first. Old code, they thought. Dead code. But when their engines froze and the stars themselves dimmed, laughter turned to screaming. Back on DanceThe Prime, the Coalition command received a dozen distress pings, then silence. Sensor buoys, near Sol, went dark. Automated drones stopped transmitting. And in the void beyond Pluto's orbit, gravimetric readings spiked like the heartbeat of a waking god. Then came the visual feed. Grainy, static-filled, but clear enough to see it. A ship. Massive. Angular. Cold. Human. It wasn't sleek like the DanceThe vessels or elegant like the Rin cruisers. It was brutalist, forged for endurance, every inch covered in heavy armor and obsolete design philosophy that somehow felt timeless. The name glowed faintly through the darkness. TSV Erebus Prime. The first Terran warship seen in over a century. And it wasn't alone. Orbital arrays hidden in the asteroid belt began to unfold, their lenses turning toward the intruder's last known coordinates. Energy signatures rose, slowly, steadily, like a monster inhaling after a long sleep. The entire Sol system had just turned its eyes back on. Across the galaxy, those monitoring deep space transmissions felt their blood chill. Earth was active again. A species thought gone, quiet, obsolete, now whispering to the stars in frequencies older than some civilizations themselves. The Galactic Council called for calm. But calm does not exist when human war code begins transmitting again. On Earth, deep beneath the frozen Andes, an ancient room came to life. Lights flickered. Terminals hummed. And in the shadows, a single AI core flickered awake for the first time in 100 years. Primary directive? It asked, voice cold and patient. Confirm source of attack, replied an unseen voice. And a prepare recall orders. For which fleet? A pause. Then, softly. All of them. In orbit, the Erebus Prime turned its cannons toward the void, its engines pulsing like the heartbeat of a resurrected god. The stars around Sol flickered once. And humanity took its first breath of war. The DanceThe coalition thought they'd found a relic. Instead, they'd awakened the dead. And the galaxy soon realized Earth was never dead. Humanity was just waiting for someone stupid enough to knock. The first transmissions hit every listening post in the Outer Rim. Encoded Terran signals, archaic by modern standards, rippling outward like shockwaves through hyperspace. Dozens of monitoring stations scrambled to decode them, and when they finally did, the translations were almost disappointingly simple. Sol defense protocols reactivated. Fleet recall in progress. Non-human presence detected within Sol exclusion zone. For some, it sounded like background noise. For others, especially the older civilizations, it sounded like prophecy fulfilled. Because deep in the archives of galactic history, there were warnings about Earth. 1,000 years ago, humanity had walked away from the stars after the Reconciliation Wars, the bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever known. Billions dead, dozens of species nearly erased, and at the center of it all, one phrase spoken by human generals as they signed the final armistice. We will not come back unless you make us. And now they had been made. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Holoscreens filled the chamber like a storm, flickering with images of ancient Terran hull schematics, outdated but terrifyingly massive. The debate was chaos. They can't possibly still have weapons that function, hissed the Rin Chancellor, her translucent tendrils quivering. Then explain the gravitic disturbances near Sol, barked the Zarn representative, slamming his clawed hand on the table. Those readings match the signature of pre-collapse Terran siege drives. Those things shouldn't exist anymore. The council speaker, an aged Thruen diplomat who remembered the First Contact War, spoke slowly, his voice trembling. You don't understand, he said. Humans don't build weapons that expire. They build weapons that wait. Meanwhile, fragments of information trickled in from the Zath Coalition's border fleets. The Vothar's promise had vanished completely, followed by 2 recon groups and 1 rescue detachment. What few recordings survived showed something almost mythic, dark silhouettes moving between the stars, silent as the void itself. And then there was the music. Some of the final transmissions carried faint Earth origin signals, melodies. A symphony of strings and drums, distorted by static, but hauntingly deliberate. The humans were broadcasting music into battle. The message was clear. This isn't a skirmish. This is a lesson. Across countless systems, panic turned to paranoia. Merchants rerouted trade routes away from Sol. Private colonies armed their orbital defenses. Recruitment campaigns surged, every empire scrambling to prepare for a conflict they didn't yet understand. And still, Earth said nothing. No demands. No threats. Just those automated warnings repeating into the void, over and over, in every known language. Do not enter Terran space. This is your only warning. On Earth itself, the awakening was complete. Under the shattered crust of old Siberia, hangars larger than cities opened for the first time in centuries. Ancient carriers rose from the ice, names carved into their hulls like scripture. Resolute. Archangel. Vengeance. Dawnfire. From orbit, the spectacle was impossible to comprehend. Humanity's sleeping giants, rising one after another, their engines lighting up the dark like reborn suns. A signal pulsed outward from the moon's surface, synchronized with the heartbeat of the planet itself. Terran Union status, online. And for the first time in a millennium, the galaxy remembered what it felt like to be prey. Because deep within the Council's restricted archives, one classified line blinked back to life, an old war file once sealed by interstellar treaty. Its title read simply, Project Orion, the Human Contingency. And next to it, a single status update began flashing red. Active. The Zath Coalition thought they could contain the threat before it grew. They sent fleets. They sent fire. And in doing so, they made the oldest mistake in the galaxy's history. They started a war with the species that invented the concept. The first Zath strike force entered Sol space without warning. 500 warships, shimmering with reactor heat and arrogance, cutting across the void like a blade aimed at the heart of Earth. They expected fear. They expected retreat. They got nothing. For 2 full minutes, their scanners registered no activity, just the silent glow of Earth below and the debris of abandoned satellites drifting aimlessly. Then the sky moved. What they thought were asteroids began to shift formation. 100 signatures. Then 200. Each one too cold to be detected until they powered on. Ancient Terran hulls, their armor blackened, their engines pulsing like awakening beasts. The Zath Admiral ordered a full volley before his voice even stopped shaking. Plasma lances streaked through the void and vanished. The beams bent, twisted, folded into the darkness, swallowed by invisible fields. Then the Terrans replied. No words, no threats. Just the deep vibration of graviton cannons spooling up across 1,000 kilometers of space. The first shot didn't explode, it imploded. 3 Zath cruisers vanished into themselves, crushed into singular points before disappearing entirely. The Admiral screamed for retreat. But humanity doesn't let its predators run. From the shadows, the flagship DanceThe Erebus Prime advanced. Its hull glowed faintly from re-entry burns, its cannons dark and ancient but flawless. A voice came over every Zath comm simultaneously, spoken in Old Terran Standard, then auto-translated into 100 languages. You have violated soul space. You have spilled Terran blood. And for that, the silence ends. Then the void erupted. Human ships moved like they remembered every war ever fought. They used gravity itself as a weapon, slinging debris at relativistic speeds, turning physics into artillery. Zath plasma fire lit the darkness, and died in it. The human fleet didn't advance in formation. It swarmed like an instinct. Every move was unpredictable, chaotic, human. Minutes later, the Zath formation ceased to exist. Their remains orbited the sun like new rings of metallic ash. But that wasn't the end. Because when the Terran Union awoke, it didn't just fight, it broadcast. All across the galaxy, the battle's telemetry was transmitted live. Every empire, every trading station, every military relay watched the feed in horrified silence. They watched Zath ships crumble. They watched human weapons bend light itself. They listened as the final words of the Zath Admiral went out to the galaxy. We thought them extinct. Gods help us, they were just waiting. The reaction was instantaneous. The Zath homeworld fell into chaos. Neighboring empires began purging their fleets from Terran borders. Some species fled entire sectors, declaring neutral evacuation zones. Others, older, wiser, began preparing envoys and peace offerings, desperate to make contact before the humans decided who was next. And through it all, Earth stayed silent. The fleets did not advance beyond Sol. They didn't conquer. They simply held position, engines burning quietly, watching the stars that had once abandoned them. The message was clear. We don't start wars. We end them. In the Grand Council chamber, one terrified advisor whispered, "We must stop them before they rebuild." The council's speaker looked up, hollow-eyed. "Stop them," he murmured. "Tell me, counselor, how do you stop something that already decided you're not worth hunting yet?" Far beyond the galactic core, long-range sensors picked up an impossible reading. Earth's second fleet. Not from Sol. Not even from the Milky Way. It was coming home. The galaxy thought the war was over. They were wrong. Because what woke in Sol was only half of humanity. The rest was still on its way home. For 1,000 years, the stars had whispered about the lost Terran fleet, a myth born from the collapse wars. It was said they'd gone too far, chasing the edges of the universe, never to return. But myths don't broadcast their coordinates. At 0600 Standard Galactic Time, every relay across the Perseus arm went dark. Moments later, a single, ancient signal pulsed through the void. DanceThe Odyssey to Sol Command, requesting permission to dock. Every species who intercepted that message knew humanity's nightmare wasn't ending.
It was multiplying.
When the Odyssey appeared, it dwarfed even the Erebus Prime. Its hull carried the scars of centuries, meteor gouges, plasma burns, fragments of alien alloys welded into Terran steel. But its engines still burned blue. And behind it followed 1,000 ships, war-torn, silent, and very, very alive. They weren't returning from exile.
They were returning from conquest.
The Terran Council stood in silence as the lost fleet hailed Earth. No speeches. No celebration. Just a simple report. Mission accomplished. Frontier secured. Awaiting new orders. No one dared ask what frontier. No one dared ask how far they'd gone. Because every sensor scan showed the same terrifying truth. The fleet wasn't coming from within the Milky Way. They were re-entering from intergalactic space. Across the galaxy, panic rippled through the networks. The Zath survivors fled to the edge of known space. The Orion Confederacy voted to surrender before contact. Even the Archon Dominion, the most ancient of empires, sent an envoy to Earth bearing relics older than light, begging for peace. But humanity wasn't looking for conquest. They were preparing something else. Inside the orbiting fortress station Luna Prime, Admiral Kira Holt stood before a galaxy map. Hundreds of red systems pulsed, locations of slaver worlds, exploiters, and despots who had profited from Earth's silence. Her orders were simple. Her expression was colder than the vacuum beyond. We stayed quiet for 1,000 years. They took that as weakness. Let's remind them what restraint costs. The Lost Fleet spread like wildfire, no invasions, no colonies. They liberated. They dismantled empires built on suffering. They shattered the Zath homeworld's orbital yards in a single night and left a transmission in orbit. Justice. Delivered. And then they vanished again, slipping beyond sensors as if the void itself protected them. Months passed. Peace, real peace, began to spread through the chaos. No one dared raid, enslave, or exploit. Every civilization remembered the same lesson: never wake the humans. But Earth remembered something else. Not vengeance. Not victory. Responsibility. In the end, a message was sent to the galactic network, simple, final, and hauntingly calm. We are not your conquerors. We are not your saviors. We are humanity. And we remember. The signal repeated once every year, marking the day the Lost Fleet came home. In a quiet observatory on Mars, a young technician stared at her console in disbelief. An unknown signal had just been detected. Origin. Deep intergalactic space. The same pulse signature as the Odyssey, but far, far older. She whispered, trembling, "Admiral, there's another fleet."